When we were talking of the layers of the earth, you've already seen the crust and the mantle. Now let's talk about the core layer of the earth. This is the innermost layer of the earth and it has a radius of around 3500 kilometers. As it is deep inside, that is why it has high temperature and pressure. This layer is made up of nickel and iron, therefore it is called as knife. So children, you have already observed that the three major layers of the earth are the crust, the mantle and the core. The crust is the uppermost layer, the mantle is the middle layer and core is the innermost layer of the earth. Now let's talk about rocks and minerals. Now, what is a rock? Rock is in fact a natural mass made of mineral matter on the earth crust. So that is definition of the word rock. So what is a rock? Rock is a natural mass made up of mineral matter on the earth crust. Now again we have to see as to what are the various kinds of rocks and how they are made. First of all, I'll tell you about the igneous rocks. The igneous rock is made when the molten magma comes out suddenly and cools on the surface of the earth or inside the earth. That's called as the igneous rock. So you have to remember that igneous rock is first of all made up of molten magma. As far as igneous rock is concerned, it is again subdivided into two: intrusive rocks and the extrusive rocks. The intrusive igneous rocks are those rocks wherein the molten magma cools inside the earth, and since it cools very slow, that is why the grains are long structured, and the best example is of granite. This is when the magma is cooling inside the earth. So that is termed as the intrusive igneous rock. But what happens when the magma cools on the surface of the earth? This is called as extrusive igneous rock, that is when the magma is cooling on the surface. Now in the extrusive, we see that the magma actually cools very quickly. That is why it has very fine structure. And the best example is that of basalt. So remember one thing, igneous rock is subdivided into intrusive and extrusive. Intrusive means inside, extrusive means comes from the word exterior, means outside. Here the formation is slow, here the formation is quick. Of course, the basic thing is that the igneous rock is made up of the molten magma when it cools down. And the word igneous as such comes from the Latin word which means fire. You've already seen about the first kind of rock, that's the igneous rock. I'll be talking about the second kind of rock, and that is the sedimentary rock. The word itself means that it is the result of the sediments. Okay, so here we see that the rocks, they roll each other and then they crack and then hit each other and small fragments are made. Then these small fragments are made into sediments by the usage of the wind and the water, which actually deposit and transport them. Then they are compressed and hardened, and this ultimately gives the formation of sedimentary rock. The word sedimentary comes from the Latin word which means to settle down. So here you are saying that the rocks are actually cracking, they are rolling, they are hitting, fragments are formed, and then the sedimentation is done. That is, they are deposited, they are transported by the agents like wind and water and ultimately compressed and hardened, and then they settle down and is the formation of the second type of rock, that is the sedimentary rock. The word igneous, if you remember, meant fire. Sedimentary means to settle down. Fire because it was made from the molten magma, and sedimentary because they are ultimately settling down the fragments and thus making the rock. Then the third type of rock that we have is the metamorphic rock. The metamorphic rock is in fact made up of the igneous and the sedimentary rock which change and form the metamorphic rock, and this is by the pressure and the heat. So the first two rocks, when they change due to the heat and the pressure, they make themselves into the metamorphic rocks. And the word metamorphic comes from the Latin word again, and it means to change. So you see, beautifully they've been translated. The first one, because of the molten magma, is called as fire. The second one, the settling down. And the third one, metamorphic, the change which occurs. This is because the igneous and the sedimentary rocks are changing into the metamorphic rock. The example that I can give you here is that the clay actually becomes slate, which is a metamorphic rock, and the limestone becomes the marble, which is a metamorphic rock. So you remember that there are three layers and there are three kinds of rocks. And now, what are actually the uses of the rocks? The rocks that we have, the stones that we have, are used in making houses and buildings. But for you, I think the biggest use that you see is that you play various games with stones. You've seen children playing pittu, you've seen children playing stapu. All this is done by stones. So those are the various usages of rocks, and I'm sure you can actually think of hundreds other uses of rocks yourself.